Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast. I'm Dr. Lynn Marie Morsky, your guide on this journey, and today we're going to be discussing movement and psychedelics with Dr. Dmitry Repin. Dmitry is the co-founder of the Institute for Psychedelic Research at Tel Aviv University, holds a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and is the producer and creative force behind the Everything Else Matters documentary. Now, before we get to Dmitry, just a reminder that the Psychedelic Medicine Podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Nothing here is to be construed as medical or legal advice. And as always, if you are a clinician and you'd like to learn more about how to discuss psychedelics with your patients and refer if necessary and appropriate, then please take a look at the Psychedelic Medicine Association. It is our mission to get you up to speed, feeling comfortable and confident to have those discussions because we know your patients are coming in and asking. And so we want you to feel ready and well equipped to answer their questions to the best of your ability. So if you want like more information, please check us out at the psychedelicmedicineassociation.org. Now, without further ado, thanks so much for joining us today, Dmitry.
Thank you, Lynn Marie. I'm very happy to be at the Psychedelic Medicine podcast.
Oh, I love that. Now, as a lifelong dancer, which I didn't tell you ahead of time, I'm very excited to have this conversation about movement and psychedelics. So I would love to hear, Dimitri, what started you down this path.
Well, it's a very personal journey. Of course, psychedelics were an important part of that. But I think the real trigger point was meeting with people from Gaga, which is a group of people based at Batsheva Dance Company in Tel Aviv. And Batsheva is one of the leading dance companies in Israel. And the founder of that dance company, Ahad Naharin, was trying to kind of explain dancers for many years what they need to do. And he invented a language and methodology for how to explain what they need to do and how to develop what they actually need to do during the dance show. And at some point, it turned out that normal people who are not dancers also benefit a lot from actually participating in that activity. And so Gaga became available in Tel Aviv, in New York City, in Paris. There are multiple locations around the world. And COVID, it also started online. But I was living in Tel Aviv a few years ago, 2021, 22, and we met Gaga. I went to some classes and kind of realized that, oh wow, from this type of movement, you can get the sensations that kind of reminds me of some movement, dance in particular, under psychedelics in some very nice setting. And it kind of struck me that as a neuroscientist by background, that it is something that we should find out what's going on in the brain or how this perception of movement when you under psychedelics influences your development of movement, because it's one thing to really and that's one reason people go to raves, because it's a lot of fun and you really have very different sensations when you move with the right music and the right state of mind. But it also influences how you acquire the movement, how you can develop different type of movements, and that opens up actually a whole avenue of research, both on the clinical side and both for for us, for normal people. Again, you are the dancer, so you sort of belong to a separate category of people who moved a lot and probably still moving. But there are many people who transition from actually not moving a lot to moving a lot and really enjoying that. And that was my personal journey. I started dancing after age of 40. And I now do different type of dancing, like dance classes and festivals as well. And the research is part of this story because it's interesting to understand the brain mechanisms behind that, because that's basically the main motivation behind the research. Because if we understand those mechanisms, we can try to influence certain situations where people have deficits related to movement. And actually, in Tel Aviv University, because it was difficult to approve the study, actually they invented the term, which I never heard before, called kinesiophobia. The kind of when people are afraid of moving, due to different conditions, maybe stroke, maybe just like obesity, like excessive weight or other kind of things. Uh, or just people don't used to, maybe social thing that people don't know how they look in public if they move, dance. And therefore, with that motivation, we put together a study where we look into the brain of people who are kind of naive to movement. Then we scan the brain. Then we do a month of Gaga. These are guided sessions. Some of them are done with psilocybin as a hypothesis that psilocybin will actually lead to more a certain kind of boost or certain changes. Again, I shouldn't say boost because we don't know, but certain changes in how the movement is developing and acquisition of specific types of movement patterns. And then we're gonna also scan after the we're not going to because some of the subjects already gone through the process, so we probably about maybe halfway through the main kind of experiment. And then we'll compare basically the more traditional fMRI analysis, the analyzing the brain connectome, how the connections change, and that will hopefully lead us to next steps.
Oh, I'm
That's a
very
short version.
I like it. I like it. I have so many questions. So before we even get into your specific study, what was your hypothesis about? Because you mentioned kinesiophobia, fear of movement,
Mhm.
and you mentioned some reasons. And one, like you said, might be there are deficits. One could be that there's pain, but you also mentioned like somebody being maybe overweight, in which case I would think some of that is maybe an anxiety or shame based thing that stands between them and movement. Is that part of what you think the psilocybin might be addressing, or kind of people's hesitancies to move?
Uh, Absolutely. And part of it is their own perception. Basically, when we're talking about, I think proprioception is probably the right term in this case. Because when you move, and again, in our paradigm, we don't actually make them move under psychedelics because we're doing the clinical dosage, which is sometimes it's difficult to move if you're doing like a proper like therapeutic dose of psychedelics. Um, but um, so that would have been part of the initial hypothesis that if you perceive yourself differently under psychedelics when you move, that may actually kind of free you from more like this social barriers or whatever barriers. So if you perceive yourself as you're moving like a god, then well, what the hell, you go and move. But also something which again, this is part of my personal observation, and it's more like an anecdotal evidence that I try to collect from people in kind of my like immediate circles. That actually after our let's say therapeutic psychedelic session, whether it's recreational or clinical, but we could talk about a significant psychedelic experience. Um, Next, sometimes up to 2 weeks. For example, when I go to a dance training session, I find that I actually internalize movement patterns much faster than I do otherwise. And that's noticeable by my dance teacher, but and so this is something which, again, it's not like a proper study, but it's just an anecdotal evidence, but that hints at something that if people internalize and acquire certain movement patterns easier, that would also be kind of a reward signal for them. But okay, I couldn't do that, but now suddenly I can do that and learn it much faster. And therefore, that may be one of the things that will improve following the psychedelic session.
And you said you noticed that for about 2 weeks?
Well, again, if you really kind of uh, really careful about your state after the psychedelic experience and you kind of keep you don't indulge like in alcohol, caffeine, and things like that. So you kind of keep and you don't like talk to people too much or meet new people, too many of them at once. Then yes, that state can last longer if you sort of break that kind of state, this beautiful, kind of gentle, vulnerable state, then yeah, things kind of tend to fall apart faster. And this effect also dissipates faster.
Well, and that makes total sense. But I was going to say that that 2 weeks is in line with the neuroplasticity data.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, how did you, and for anybody who, I mean, if Guldolan is listening and would like to come on and explain, we'd love to
Mhm.
have you. But in her research, I believe it was MDMA and psilocybin were both about 2 weeks open of that neuroplastic window, or at least the critical social reward critical period, I think was, if I'm quoting it at all correctly. And so, dancing may or may not be, or movement tangentially associated with that social reward. But like you said, there is definitely a social aspect of it. But psilocybin and MDMA were like 2 weeks of opening. I think LSD was three, ibogaine was four. So how did you choose to use psilocybin in your experiment?
Well, in a way, I think psilocybin seemed to be the safest, and we didn't really. It wasn't much difference because it was a clinical setup. We're doing all these sessions in the hospital with the proper like two people supervising. Like basically, it's a clinical protocol. So we could it could be different choices, but again, pushing people to do ayahuasca probably is a stretch because it's a difficult experience. So for us, psilocybin was it's a strong enough and powerful enough experience that gives you this kind of neuroplasticity window, and at the same time, it seems to be the most well tolerated experience. And yeah, and certainly we didn't have a problem acquiring subjects for that experiment.
I imagine. I imagine. So, is there, and I have so many questions about the study design, but do you take some kind of baseline assessment of their movement prior to the
Yes,
psychedelic?
yes, that's a very important piece, and that I think probably what took us quite a while to figure out because we are tracking the movement with currently it's an OptiTrack technology, which is basically it's a bunch of cameras and you have some markers. So all the movements are digitized. So we know exactly how the movements, and we started with wearing certain kind of motion capture suits, but that was a little bit cumbersome because you need to put it on a person before. It's like so in the end, we just went with the OptiTrack technology, but yes, every person is certainly recorded in the very beginning when they're just starting the experiment. And uh, I think at least three times we're recording it, in the beginning, then in after 1 week when people get psilocybin or placebo, and then also at the end.
Okay, and they do just the one experience with psilocybin.
Yes, it's just one
Okay,
experience. Yeah, that's it.
and when you get them in for that baseline and the other ones, do are they told to bring their favorite music? What are they moving to?
Well, this is something that Gaga comes to help us because there are a few things in this Gaga people methodology, if you will, that makes it a little different from many others. First of all, there are no mirrors in the room, and that's a rule. So the only thing you see, the reference points are the other people, and it's like no judgment. So you can see other people, but you never see yourself, and then you can maybe, I don't know, sometimes copy other people or kind of engage a little bit. That's one thing. And second is music is secondary. And this is actually quite important part of Gaga because they try to make you move, whether there is a very, I don't know, rhythmic music that really helps you. Basically, you cannot even like stand still, to music which is not really kind of, some people consider it danceable, but you find the certain rhythms, certain patterns that you kind of use for movement, and sometimes you need to break patterns. So the answer is no, they don't bring their favorite music because music is secondary to the dance
So they
experience.
are moving to silence, if I
No,
understand
no, it's
correctly.
not silence. There's some music, but
Oh,
again,
okay.
it's not like overwhelming music. It's not the music that taking over. It's more like the music that sometimes gives you kind of opportunity to make your movement a little bit easier because of the rhythmic pattern. Sometimes it actually doesn't help you. Sometimes maybe you want to move a certain way, but you ask to move a different way, and that will interfere. So, but it's guided. It's guided pretty. I would say, like every few seconds you get a certain like, okay, do this, do that, and now like, I don't know,
And can,
switch to a different type of movement. And also, which I probably should mention, that there are very different types of movements. For example, there's a movement of shake, right? Very, very rapid
Mhm.
movement, which is also common in like ecstatic dance and some of the other movement practices. Or there may be a movement when you need to like maximally let go of all your joints and you're kind of very smooth, or you should flex your muscles very tightly and kind of try to move as a bodybuilder type action. So those movements are combined, and there are many more. I'm just giving you a few examples, many more, and they actually, first of all, it's really good for the body because you actually make your different like joints and sometimes even bones move against each other, and you stretch, and you. But also you learn a lot about the awareness. So, which may start from the skin, but also goes inside. And that awareness helps you really in the long run to extend the range of movement, to extend how kind of fast you can do certain things. So that's important part, not just the types of movement, but also the awareness that's an inward focused that in a certain time frame helps you develop movement better.
yeah, because I was going to ask, what are some examples of the cues they give, and are those some of the examples, like flex your muscles or
No, no,
shake?
no, that is exactly some examples.
And are there participants in your study who are dancers, or are they all
No, no, no. These are kind of
okay?
naive
Gotcha.
movers, if you will.
Nice. How did you recruit for that? How did you like? What was your movement
Uh,
cutoff?
well, it's again, it's not like hard. So, like, have you ever moved? Yes, no, no, of course not. But I think it's whether you're a professional dancer and your exposure to Gaga, because Gaga is quite known in like Tel Aviv, for example. That's where experiments happen. And if people already did Gaga sessions, then we say no. But if they haven't done and they're not professional dancers, then yeah, they can participate.
Okay. And I'm wondering if you're also measuring, because right now it sounds like the focus is on how does your movement change? But did you also take some like psychological surveys on the intake to see if some of the being able to move in ways maybe they haven't before might help like release some trauma or improve mood in any way?
Well, yes, of course, and that's part of the psilocybin or placebo protocol that people also do, like the mystical experience, typical type of questionnaires. But for us, again, the reason and again, the studies hasn't finished, so again, we can analyze results in any way we want. But kind of the key idea is to really see at the objective metrics that we take from the movement, so we can compare like the metrics that we calculate in terms of different, I call them dimensions of movement, whether it's a range, frequency, speed, things like that. Um, and yes, if we see that, let's say the mystical experience correlates with, I don't know, certain types of movement, like, I don't know, with shake or, well, that wouldn't be a surprise because mystical experience, as we know, correlates well with many things that related to psychedelics. But we'll find out. So we don't actually, we haven't formed any specific hypothesis on that dimension, on like type of experience and sort of particular movement dimensions that will be developed more or less. But part of the hypothesis that we have is that certain qualities or dimensions of movement might be affected more or less by psychedelics than others. And that potentially will give us this maybe some insights into the specific brain mechanisms because certain different types of movements sometimes require kind of different circuits to engage and different parts of the body. So maybe we will be able to different, I don't know, concentrations of receptors again in different areas. So maybe from studying different type of dimensions of movement and how they're differentially affected by psychedelics, we might be able to gain some new insights into brain mechanisms behind psychedelics because we still don't know a lot about that.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. What kind of preparation do the subjects have before their experience?
Well, again, there's always a live Gaga teacher, especially in the first session. So it's like personal connection. So it's really, again, it doesn't require any special thing because all you need is your body and then maybe comfortable pants. I guess that's about it.
Because we usually talk about preparation before journeys, like they might discuss intentions or dis
Ah, you mean this the psychedelic journey?
yes, 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 yes.
Well, again, these are healthy people, so in a way we don't try to kind of dig into their whatever issues they might have. So I wouldn't say there's any like very specific kind of preparation that goes into that.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
certainly. Again, preparation, discussing that what may happen during psychedelic experience, like this type of things, but not something. So okay, kind of maybe you want to move. Let's concentrate on movement. Like no,
Okay.
don't.
And this is an interesting study design because y- you're measuring things that are taking place at different times from the journey. And I'm wondering if, because usually after the journey, there's integration and they discuss what came up in the journey. Is there any type of integration that your subjects go through after the movement sessions that follow the psilocybin to see if anything comes up in those?
Again, we don't focus. Certainly, again, like psychedelic is a kind of very kind of human type of interaction experience that often follows by very human interactions, and people kind of try to bond and discuss what's going on. So certainly can exclude that dimension. Mm, but again, once you're out of the psychedelic experience, you're basically more into the movement world. And movement world it doesn't have all these kind of guidelines and restrictions. It's much more sort of free and flexible and spontaneous. And people, again, we don't have any control over. Maybe they really like it and they decide to like start doing Gaga or something else for, I don't know, prolonged period of time. So that dimension is really beyond our control. But certainly we need people to kind of acquire those skills to go through the training. And so far we did have problems really with people kind of dropping out because it's fun also.
Nice. I was going to
Um,
ask, did they find it fun? Did they find it enjoyable?
it is enjoyable, yes.
Ah, very nice. Well, I don't know how much you can share about because it's an ongoing trial. So I assume most of the what you've seen so far is under wraps for now, and we have to get an update.
Well, yeah, it's kind of certainly premature to talk about the results. We did have a pilot with 10 people. We did have kind of the brain data, the fMRI data. So we looked into that. We have, again, some kind of hypothesis where we should look kind of more deeply, but it's certainly shouldn't talk about that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very fair. Very fair. Well, we will keep an eye peeled, but I think I liked having this conversation because, like you brought up, raves are a place a lot of people have had psychedelic experiences. And I do think that many of them would not necessarily be raving if they did not have that psychedelic on board. You know, like you said, the average person might have a lot of kind of social anxiety around movement. And so I think bringing that to light and looking at the intersection of the two is such an interesting field that you've chosen to examine.
Yeah, thank you. And again, I guess part of so you mentioned rave experience, and so maybe I should mention the documentary that we just released because the sort of one of the ideas behind that documentary is called Everything Else Matters, and now you can like watch it in many different platforms. That there are different types of psychedelic experiences, from very recreational, such as rave, to very clinical, such as a clinical trial. And then a few things in between, some more like spiritual, retreat type, different type of experiences. And to me, that certain types of those experiences can teach us things that we wouldn't be able to learn, for example, in clinical setting, because people don't dance in clinical setting. So
Not
at least I
generally.
haven't heard. Again, maybe if we get to some very interesting results and we say, look, this is what you might be able to do, then we'll see some changes in that realm, but not at the moment. And also, for example, when we're talking about certain more, I know, let's say ayahuasca ceremonies. So often there is a preparation process that involves movement, that involves a lot of embodied experiences. It may be a certain type of sauna or whatever, like in Mexico, it would be like a Temazcal experience. So it's a lot about preparing not just the mind, but also preparing the body, both with the certain type of diet or at least certain restrictions, with, let's say, a lot of movement, guided movement or spontaneous movement or whatever. So these kind of things, they actually affect the journey and the outcome quite a bit. And we don't get to study that in clinical settings. So therefore, at least some initial wisdom, some anecdotes or some maybe best practices that have been developed within those non-clinical settings may be very useful uh, to inform clinical and maybe other areas that use psychedelics. So, and therefore, our motivation was not to just talk about the movement. Actually, we don't talk as much about the movement in the film, but to talk about all the other aspects, such as music, such as also like everything that goes into certain setting and the substance itself, kind of collective wisdom from different types of experiences, and some common grounds that shamans, therapists, neuroscientists, and anthropologists can have sort of agreed upon that, yes, that's important, that's kind of thing.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love finding common ground between those groups. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, where can people find your documentary?
It's on Amazon Prime. There are some YouTube channels. There are different countries, there are different platforms. But if you go to our website, it's everythingelsematters.com, then everything is there.
I love it. And where can people find more about you and your research?
Well, I guess there's a website for Tel Aviv University Institute for Psychedelic Research, which I can.
People can
Well,
Google it. If
yeah,
it's
yeah,
if
we
it's
can Google it.
Googleable,
Yeah,
they can find it.
yeah,
And
it's
we'll put it
certainly
in the show
Google. It's
notes.
pretty new, but because it's taken like forever for them to put it up, but it's uh, searchable. I have a link in page, like Twitter page, Facebook page.
Okay.
But right now, again, my role is slightly different. I'm not like a principal investigator. I'm more like a guy who's trying kind of to put together some interesting projects and find a way to move them forward with resources or with inspiration, just putting the right team together. And that activity is mostly centered on my website of my foundation. It's called Improbability Foundation, and the website is improbability.foundation, where these projects are kind of described in more or less detail.
Very nice. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing what is some of the most novel research I have covered in 6 years of the show. I love it.
Wow, wow. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and we look forward to having you back and telling us the results. And in the meantime, we can all go watch your documentary. Everything else matters. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dimitri.
Thank you, Lynn Marie. It's a pleasure.
All right, for everybody else out there, until next time.